Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining the Family Dynamics webinar hosted by our CEO, Hugh Massey of DNA Behavior. We're privileged to have him on the call today to outline sort of the behavioral smart approach to family dynamics. There will be poll questions through this webinar, so we encourage you to be actively involved. And if you have any questions, there's actually a chat box that you can actually enter questions. And either myself or Trip Rockwell will monitor those questions and we'll answer them as we go, or we'll save them to the end of the presentation. The webinar is expected to take about 15 minutes, and at the end of it, you will receive a survey at the end of the webinar. We encourage you to complete that. It really helps us make sure that we're tailoring the webinars for interested areas. And the other thing I wanted to mention is you will receive a copy of the PDF of this presentation along with the call recording after it's completed. So without further ado, I welcome Hugh Massey to introduce the subject. Thank you, Hugh.
Thank you, Leon. It's great to be here this morning to present behaviorally smart family dynamics and how we close the relative gap. As you'd all appreciate, one of the biggest issues in family dynamics in any family is the fact that every family member is different. And one of the challenges that you have and realities that you have in dealing with families is that family members cannot be fired. So you're actually forced to be in that place of dealing with the family differences. Today's presentation, I'm going to direct quite a lot at advisors and consultants who deal with family-related issues, but present some of it from the perspective of being a family member. This is an area of work that I have dealt or addressed extensively for the last 16 or 17 years through my time of having a financial services business and then building DNA Behavior in 2001, where I did a lot of work with wealthy families and helping them navigate, the issues of family succession and building the roadmap for the future. So it's an area that I am extremely passionate about in my own role as a wealth mentor, and it's knowledge that I want to pass to you. And I think whether any of you at the end of the call wish to deal with family dynamics as your primary business, or and be a family consultant. There are some wealth mentors who use our systems that move to that area like I did, but there are many of you that are advisors that nevertheless, in your role as an advisor and as investment manager, having a greater understanding of some of the potential issues that are there inside a family can help you do your job a whole lot better. So there's also the collaboration opportunity that sits there to work with someone who's a specialist family consultant to address some of these issues. But awareness of them, I think, is the name of the game. What we're trying to do here with Financial DNA, and our belief is that it's a better scenario that if every family member knows who they are or what their strengths and struggles are, it builds a much higher level of understanding, acceptance, and respect. And then the family succession plan is built around who everybody is. So, what do I define as family continuity? And this is the goal at the end of the day. And whilst it's not written here, in actual fact, what I say to every family that I work with or interact with, the real goal at the end of the day is whether the family can sit down with each other at Thanksgiving and be happy, smiling, engage with each other, not be there in bitterness, be there because they want to be there. And if you can reach that scenario, then I think as a parent, as a sibling, then all is pretty well. But we can look at it more technically and say that we want to build sustainable family relationships across the generations for living an improved family life, leading the family business, building and preserving wealth, and creating a legacy. And at the end of the day, we think if these areas can be pulled together, there will be a much higher level of confidence within the family in its decision making, And that ultimately is the goal, particularly for dealing with finances and making key family life decisions in the future. And that can all be achieved if everybody knows each other a whole lot better and what their possible life and financial motivations are. What is the big issue inside families is that everyone has different expectations. And some of these expectations come from innately who we are and innately or from have evolved through our life journey. And importantly, on top of that, every family member has different perceptions of what those expectations should be. And the other E word that I like to bring up is entitlement. And everybody has different perceptions of life, different perceptions of their upbringing that all lead to entitlements. And all of that needs to be unraveled when you're dealing with families. Also, what gets in the way of family continuity, I've sort of pinned it down to three big areas, but there are probably many more. But these are the three big ones that come to mind for me and that need to be managed, and this is where expert help and awareness can really help. So on the emotional side, what you've got to realize is that inside families, some of the children may actually feel shame about the wealth. We all have this desire in life to have more money, but for some, it's actually a prison camp for them, and there's a great book out there called The Golden Ghetto that talks about that. And so people have this shame about wealth, or if dad or grandpa or grandma or mum have been very successful, or even a sibling has been very successful, they might have a fear of not being good enough, and that will always sit with that individual. And then the fact is that everybody has different capabilities to earn money, to earn a living, to live life, and coming into acceptance of what those are and what the limitations are, or what the limitations are not, is important, and it all builds up in one's mind. And sometimes I think in families we create more issues in our head than maybe actually are there, but sometimes those issues are put there as well. And so these things are all important to unravel. What I think is one of the biggest problems out there is a lack of purpose, and I think that when you see spoiled children in families who don't have their own life direction, that's actually the biggest problem for dealing with expectations and entitlement. The least entitled are going to be those that have their own life already set. They're on their own path, and they're able to do a lot of life themselves. And so purpose is really, really big, I believe, in getting every family member on the right path and in the right direction. And, of course, that's also true for the family. As much as every family member needs to have some kind of life purpose and meaning to get out of bed each day, the family needs to have that, a cohesive bond. What's the reason that everybody's going to sit around that Thanksgiving table or come to family meetings to talk about the finances? So there needs to be that cohesive bond. That's really important. The other area that's big is financial misalignment. And so often wills and legal structures and financial plans and investment plans and policy statements and continuity plans, whatever they're all termed as, are written without understanding the needs of each family member's lives. And so there's a lot of controlling people from the grave. There's a lot of very poor communication as to why decisions have been made. I've had the unfortunate experience of being trustee of estates, and if I had my time again, I would have known what was put in the will, where I've seen people's lives are controlled from the will. Money's been given in terms of income for life, and then the capital is sent away somewhere else, to a charity when the people die or whatever. The fact is that people's expectations have been mismanaged, and the survivors don't know why mum and dad or grandpa made the decisions they did and what they were thinking. And I think having a much better and stronger communication between the generations is so important and will solve many of the problems. It may not be comfortable to be doing that during your lifetime, but it's going to solve a whole lot of problems later, including costly and what will often be fruitless litigation. There's a lot of good research out there on the family issues, and some of you will have heard it, in terms of passing wealth between the generations, and often the wealth doesn't survive and gets significantly dissipated. Probably the best research I've seen that pulls it all together really well is from Williams and Precer. And really what we pin this down to is the fact that there are strong communication and relationship failures within the family business, and the children at the end of the day have not been involved enough in the processes. And I think that's an important thing for the parents to do. I know in my own family where my mother has been the director of all of this, we've always had as children quite a high level of engagement with the family solicitors or attorneys, accountants, and other advisors, so that one, there would be a seamless transfer, but also there's been very good communication about what happens in when life events happen, whether that life event is death or incapacitation, or just the need to get somebody educated or deal with special needs, all of which happen inside families. So, like in teams, when you get everybody working together on the same page, you have great communication, great energy, then the results go up. And, the results not just earning more investment income each year, it's measured in terms of, whether you can sit around the Thanksgiving table, as I said at the start, the overall quality of life, but also the financial decision-making is sound. It's all blended together. So, what is the primary issue, and I've been alluding to this all the way along, is the fact that every family member has different innate preferences and behaviours. Each family member is born with different behavioural makeup innately. Whilst they come from the same parents, there will be different perspectives on life. And I know, to make it clear, in my own family, my brother and I are 15 months apart. We're opposite in behavioural style. We have relatively opposite perspectives on life, but we were brought up in the same home with exactly the same opportunities, with the same value sets given to us, but we still look at the world very differently. We look at our upbringing very differently, and that is coming from innate DNA, and that is what has to be dealt with. And that perspective is there pretty much throughout life, and that's why we call our business DNA Behaviour, and our products have all got DNA in the name, because we're really trying to understand these behaviours at the core, because they're the primary driver of how someone's going to behave. So if you're looking at a family, and whether it's your own family or another family, some questions to think about can be, which question is more important in the present deals is perhaps driven by where is the family at right now, but what steps do you need to take for having a higher quality of family life? How do you confidently choose between the many options in your life, family and business, to successfully manage the transfer of your family's wealth? I found that a big question for family leaders, entrepreneurial business leaders who've got assets to pass on, because at the end of the day, they have lots of choices out there, but they don't really have the confidence to choose between them, and they often fall down in the middle on some of the choices. So getting more confidence is important, and I think a lot of this is about helping with decision-making confidence. Has the family been involved in the making of the will? Or is it just a will that you've designed with the lawyer or the attorney and the hope that it will work for everybody? How will your family respond to the wealth transfer decisions you make? And I think that, again, comes down to the communication that's needed up front. Who is walking with you on the journey? And so I believe everyone needs a guide. I'm very big on people being coached, mentored. A man is not an island. We need sounding boards to help us out in making these choices. So what role are you going to play in the lives of the families that you serve? Are you just going to be the wealth manager, which is fine, or are you going to be the family consultant? And, I believe if you're going to play the role of wealth manager, and that's how you're getting remunerated in terms of fees and investment management income, that's great. But I think you could also, in that role, have greater awareness of who each of the family members are. I know that some of the wealth mentors that use our systems are working towards being the family consultant as well, either exclusively the family consultant and moving away from the investment management and financial planning arena to be the family consultant, and others are trying to blend it in together. one of the big issues that I bring up and why I often advocate that there is an independent family consultant there collaborating with the advisors is independence. It's very easy if you've been the financial advisor or the lawyer or the accountant or otherwise a professional consultant dealing with one or more of the family members over a long period of time, you are naturally probably going to hold a bias towards them, and in fact you might know their blind spots where you might hold a bias against them because you don't always agree with everything they're doing. Whereas the opportunity with a family consultant who's independent of some of the history is that they can come in with fewer conflicts of interest and really help the family out in that regard. And it's not to take away the role of the wealth mentor. It's meant to be additive. This is meant to be collaborative. So that's just food for thought, because I think what I see with some of the advisors who come to us with questions about families, there are issues that are really hot in the kitchen for them, and I'm not sure they should be touching them. But that doesn't mean that there needs to, the family needs to be passed on. I think it's just the family consultant that comes to help in that regard. And, the family consultant can play all sorts of, roles in providing objective insights in the human areas particularly, but the financial and business capital areas as well, which are all important pillars for the family. Build in or help build in the interplay of passing on the wealth, but also the values, virtues, and memories. Closing down the generational gaps, which will be around communication. Succession planning, mentoring individual family members to develop their own their own life purpose, and then also facilitating the family purpose and mission. I think that's a really big role an independent facilitator can play. And then in an ongoing way is a family governance role to check that the family are making good decisions and having some independent thinking in that along the way are all roles that the independent facilitator can play. We do approach family dynamics and building the family continuity plans a little bit like we would with a team, except recognising the fact that family members can't be fired. But I think the first point is to recognise that there will be different behaviours in the family. That is actually a positive thing in the sense that different perspectives are good to see all of the issues that are facing the family. I think you want some results-driven family members, and you want relationship-building family members as well, particularly for dealing with younger children, but also just recognising the human issues that are going to face the family on its journey. Just getting all of the perspectives there is important. So it's important for each family member to understand, accept, and respect each other. And what I find is that as the respect goes, then, in a matter of months, decision-making really degenerates into poor decisions, people working around each other, and then you get to the mistrust, and that's really the problem. So, if you can build the understanding, acceptance, and respect within the family unit, and then build some commitment towards key goals. This is where a lot of families move to having a philanthropy plan or a plan-giving plan to build the cohesiveness, and then that's really well communicated. Then the trust and the unity all follow after that.
And real quick, folks, just to get a little pulse check here, got a poll for everybody. Keep us on our toes. So family continuity is building sustainable relationships across generations for, and select the following. We'll give everyone a few seconds to chime in. And then we'll close the polls up and share the results. And it looks like we're all on board, pretty much all the above. Great. Thank you very much.
So when we're working on a family continuity program with a family, and sometimes these exercises last a month or two, and sometimes they're an ongoing experience for several years. Rome wasn't built overnight. I think it's good, though, for the family to break it down into concrete steps and not to try and achieve too much at once. And, there's, like anything in facilitation, it's true with teams. You can only push people so far as to, where they're ready to go in the family life. And, where the family's at in all those respects. But when we're generally speaking, when we're approaching a family continuity program, we're going to want to work with every family member individually first to understand their financial DNA, understand their own life purpose, where they're going, sound them out on the strengths and struggles they see for the family unit and their perspectives. We would start with the family leader. Usually that's going to be mum and dad, and getting them on the same page with regard to that and a higher level of self-awareness. And then it moves to the children. And then in phase 2, we're going to look to bring the family together in a family meeting once we know that the situation is healthy and that there are concrete points to discuss, whether they are points of agreement or points of disagreement, to bring the family together to discuss those, to share more information, and to build a family purpose and something that's going to, make the family committed to work together for the longer term, and remind each family member of why they're there. And every family does this in different ways. I've seen families with 6 or 7 siblings where the whole family is living on the family estate in their own homes, and they do everything together. It's almost, I'm not going to say that's a cult, but it's very strongly bonded. And then you get to see other families that they all live far apart, but they're all talking to each other and comfortable in their own socks individually and as a family unit. It doesn't have to look and be the same for every family member of the family. It's what the family as a unit wants at the end of the day. Now, I think once you've got the family purpose right and the family unit standing and moving in the right direction, then it's looking at the family business if there is one, and what's the leadership of that business? Is it a sustainable enterprise in its own right? Should it be kept with a family member running it in the future? Do you bring in outside management? Does it get sold? And again, that just comes down to the issues of the family as to whether there's someone capable to run it, passionate and interested to run it, got the skills and capabilities to do it, or is it best to have it put in the hands of independent management and overseen with a board of directors, or in fact, does it get sold? Then we can look at the family succession and how the wealth is going to be passed on in the family, and again, the issue of family philanthropy might bob up in there as well. And then I believe very strongly in there being a family governance type council for the family unit. The family makes its decisions around a charter, and there is an independent advisor, a bit like a board of a bit like an independent director, even though they may not be called that, who's there to make sure that the family stays on track, that they're dealing with all of their respective professionals in the right way, and they're looking at the interests of the family unit holistically. And then it's a matter of navigating the family to grow and build its quality of life on an ongoing basis and keep making good decisions for the future. So what's the process? As I've talked a little bit so far, in terms of the discovery phase, this is where we do give every family member the financial DNA to complete and really get down to their aptitudes, interests, and competencies. We also encourage all the advisory team who's collaborating with the family to complete it as well, to see where the strengths and struggles are there, and certainly within the business. And then the next stage is to have the family meeting, and potentially some of the family members might need coaching and development to discover their own life purpose, and that's where this would all happen. And then, from these interactions and discovery process, a continuity plan can be developed for the family that's going to encompass, its business, the family life, the family wealth, and the philanthropy going forward. So these are some of the issues as well that need to be, addressed in building the family purpose. And again, in the blue boxes here, these are really the individual issues for each of the family members that need to be uncovered, particularly understanding their behavioural talents, passions, and the values. And I think it's important for the families to understand how each family members perceive their environment and their life experiences, and getting that out on the table so that there is no regret about moving forward. And then as far as the family is concerned, each family member, we use a questionnaire for this, should be addressing these 6 areas here to see where they perceive the family to be strong and where they perceive the family to be struggling. There will always be something that some family members aren't seeing. This is a place where there can be clarification, and that will help in building the family succession plan. So it is a very robust and methodical process that we go through with a lot of structure, using our systems to help with it. And so when we're looking at the financial DNA, and some of you on the call today might know what financial DNA is all about, and others this will be news for you, but our focus has always been on understanding the natural behaviour, those behaviours that sit below the surface. And it's easy to say that you're in your family with mum and dad and the children, say that everybody knows each other, but there will always be, it's human nature, there will always be some blind spots that dad or mum will have about one or more of the children, and frankly about each other. And what we want to uncover is, firstly speaking, is what some of those blind spots will be and what some of the strengths will be and how everybody's going to behave under pressure, and and for the longer term, and get the family talking about that, so that at the end of the day each family member can leverage their strengths, and that also we're going to see where are the different perspectives coming from. Of course, there are learned situational behaviours as well that need to be addressed, that have evolved over time, and we work on uncovering those as well.
And we'll do another poll real quick. Do you understand how natural behavior impacts personality and decision making? And we'll give everyone a chance to respond. Just a quick pulse check there, and share those results. We're reaching about 8%, so a little further to go, but we'll bring you all on board. Thank you.
Just to drive in a little bit further on the natural behaviour, I think that the reason I've always wanted to know it is because we want to see the person unmasked, the family member unmasked, and like in any group situation, there will be family members that pretend what they're thinking and feeling. There will be others, of course, that you see it on their sleeve, and they're very honest and direct about it. But so getting it on the table is important. The other point why this is so important in using I believe it's so important in using a process like financial DNA as a discovery process, or if you want to use another one, that's well and good. But the reason for using a process like this and having questionnaires that are structured is that you are, from a facilitation point of view, one, you're engaging every family member equally in the conversation about what's going to happen for the family in the future. And you're, importantly, as a facilitator, you're treating each family member equally. Each family member has been asked the same questions. And so often what I find that happens when there is more looser facilitation processes or discovery processes where the facilitator is not following a structured process but asking the questions that they feel that they should be asking, is it's going to create more suspicion amongst the family members as to who got asked what and whose interpretation of the answers and the questions is it? Is it the facilitators? Is it the advisors, or is it the family members? And so by doing it this way, it makes it a level playing field for all, which we believe creates more trust. And that's why we've been very successful in handling family dynamics this way. Yes, some people don't want to answer questionnaires, but I mean, they're taking 10 minutes. It's pretty quick, but it's extremely objective, and it's, as I reiterate, it is creating a level playing pitch for everybody, and that's so important. So let's look at how this plays out in a case study, and this is a real family scenario. I've changed the names for the innocent, but the status quo. John Williams here. He has these assets there, not unusual for a reasonably wealthy man, and then there's his wife, and then there's his 3 adult children. Not all the adult children have made it to the photograph, but there's part of the family there, and of course the beautiful dog is sitting there as well. He's part of the family too. But they believe they have a harmonious family life, and that is somewhat me being sarcastic, that is defined by the 4 E's. Everybody wants entertainment all the time. Everybody wants excitement. They want the holidays as well. Everybody has entitlement and everybody has expectations, so you can see the build-up there. And as I said before, some of that just comes from how the family's lived its life with wealth, and also then their different perspectives and what they believe they should have or not have. So Dad now is 65 years old. He wants to start retiring, and the family and Mum and Dad have the general goal of distributing their family wealth, possessions, and responsibilities equitably. They want to communicate their values downward to their children, and they want to see common ground in the family unit in terms of purpose and mission. So how do we address this? So we were looking at the relationship continuity amongst the family members here, because that is the priority. Getting values passed down as well is very, very important, and then looking at the business continuity, financial continuity, and philanthropic continuity. So this is a good way to break up what we're doing in the continuity planning and to address all of these issues, whether it's in one meeting or 5 meetings or multiple meetings over a number of years, and then also, of course, continuously monitor the integration of these issues or areas. And so John was in that more just because of his age and the time of life, and I think it's just really natural. He's been to the attorney to draft the will, and he generally sees it as quite a private process, and it's been pursued with a lot of legalese. And so John has created what he thinks is important for his family, but he hasn't had the family discussion about actually what is in the will and how every family member feels about. So at this point, the family would be living with his cooking potentially for the rest of their lives, and that is a potential problem. And it's, you know, whilst we always would encourage the husband and wife to get together and do their will jointly, that often doesn't happen. And you do find situations, and that happened in this situation, where Mum and Dad did their wills independently because they both had independent wealth. That also has its own issues as well. So what we have to, to sort out here is what do John's children actually think, and get that out on the table and build a family continuity plan. And this really got originated in this family because one of the children wanted to see a more cohesive, open family discussion about what was going to happen for succession planning, because they saw it as important for their future and what was going to be expected of them, in terms of participating in the family business. So that was what drove this one to the table. It wasn't so much Dad trying to drive it to the table. It was actually one of the kids at the end of the day brought it to the table. So what we do is, as I said before, in terms of the procedures, is that we have every family member complete their individual financial DNA discovery. Then we have all of those, each family member then facilitated through those, then all the insights from each individual report is combined into a family report. And then we, as the facilitator, do a lot of study of that to look for where the closest similarities in style are. That of itself can cause shared perspectives, but there can also be clashes for power. If there's two people that are very, dominant and take charge or commanding, then they might have a clash for power, but at the same time they will, see the family life through the results that the family generates. So you've got to look at the closest similarities and differences, and then also, the bigger gaps in the styles across the family will usually be where there are blind spots or there are disagreements, or somebody, for example, Dad is not seeing the perspective of one of his sons or daughters, and that can come because they are so different. I've got young children, but I look at my 2 young children, and I said to my wife before they were born that for my sins of being an extreme introvert, I'll have 2 extroverted children, and just watching them, day by day interacting with people and have very different, perceptions of life, even at 6 and 4 years old, to me is it's fascinating, but at least I understand where someone's coming from. And I've got a brother, as I said before, 15 months younger than me, that is so different to me on many levels. Just understanding his perspectives and, in this is really important. And for me, taking care with him to ensure that, he knows that I understand his feelings at each level is also important. So we've got to look at the differences between mum and dad or the parents, and then we've got to look at the differences between each parent and each child. And that's quite detailed work to really build up that family picture and map. Then look at the contextual situation that the family's in and what are the key decisions that have to be made, and look at what each perspective of the family will be, and then try to facilitate from that perspective, and then in the end, get everybody to come together and have a shared perspective on what to do. So you can see in the Williams family, here are the different profile styles that are there. You've got Father John, who is the influencer profile, so fairly strong, big in the room person, fairly also spontaneous. And then you've got his wife, who also likes to be in the limelight, but she's a lot more planned and structured. And, the similarity here actually caused some clashes in terms of who's in the limelight, the centre show, but also her being more planned at times, is a cut-off for him, and he could be far too instinctive and move too quick for her. So that often caused some differences in their lives, and then you can see the differences down here with the children. And Dad sometimes had trouble relating to his younger son because his younger son is so different to him and a much more gentle human being. He had a closer relationship with his eldest son and his daughter. And in Father John's mindset, his perception was that his eldest son would take over the family business. But that, as we'll see in a minute, wasn't actually the end result, because passion also plays a big role. So what we do with our family reporting is we map out all the different behavioural styles, and we are looking for the differences the whole time, and to see where the triggers are. We can see it's a bit more of a results-driven family versus relational, so they're a little bit more goal-driven and bottom-line thinking, and that's reflected in the fact that they're quite fast-paced and spontaneous. So quite a lot of quick decision-making within this family, a little bit of ramrodding decisions, and being a little bit too instinctive with it and not setting plans and boundaries. So that can get a bit fast in the kitchen for mum and the younger son. And again, here's where we start to look at all the differences and the impacts on each other in the family unit. I'm not going to go through them all, but what we find is that these graphics here, when we use them in the family setting, really bring out where each family member is different, and it does help them, and where they're similar, and does help them reconcile in what they're doing, and it builds that understanding, acceptance, and respect. We also provide the insights on what to do with the different behaviours and how to treat each other going forward, and what are the cues that need to be remembered on a day-in, day-out basis, because it's not just having a fun and great family meeting. This has got to be lived out going forward, and we try to encourage, the continuous awareness amongst the family. So, what are some of the guidelines in facilitating families is to meet with every family member individually before there's a family meeting. That is absolutely key. Give equal attention to every family member. There can be no bias demonstrated, because you'll lose it or a family member straight away, and it'll ruin the whole process. You've got to get them talking about their differences and the concerns for the family unit. Try and liberate them of the misperceptions that might be there. Your role as a wealth mentor, and this really does depend on how far are you going. Are you doing this to be more aware of the issues so that you can, navigate the financial decision making, or are you there to solve problems? But I think, the first step is just to be aware, and I think, what I'm encouraging today is that for those of you who are wealth mentors and advisors, if you can learn to become more aware of the issues that might be in the family, that's a great start, so that you're not always treading on minefields and know how to build a plan around it. It might be that the role of the facilitator is to help come and bridge some of those gaps. I don't believe in bringing the family together for a meeting until they're ready to come together, and that's something that's important. If they're not ready to all be in the room together and talk about the issues openly and comfortably, then you shouldn't bring them together. But of course, you still got to have some, allow for some creative conflict within the family and discussion of the issues. It doesn't all have to be perfect, but if there is, emotionally explosive issues, you've got to be careful about bringing the family together. And then we use the family group report to be the glue.
Great, and we'll take a quick break with a poll question here. What percentage of family businesses survive to the second generation? And we'll give everybody a chance to weigh in on that. And got some quick responses here, so we'll go ahead and close the poll and share. Got a majority coming in at the 30% mark. I believe that's accurate, or 25%, 30%, right in there. So good. We're all on the same page. Thank you very much.
As you can all see and experience, from some of the issues that I've raised today, it really is hard in building family succession plans and the family continuity. And I think one of the big issues that does need to be addressed, and of course it does depend on how the money is made, how it's legally structured, with taxation, a whole lot of issues are at stake there. But the more that the families are entangled with each other, the generations are entangled with each other by the finances or by the money, the greater risk there will be of family issues, going down the track. So, I think for some families it is better to split the wealth up to some degree, so that each family member's life is not tied to the other financially, if that can be achieved. Of course, there are many issues to be addressed in doing that, but at least giving each family member some level of independence financially is important, of perhaps the central family unit. Again, it depends on how much money is there, how it was earned, where it is right now. Will drive some of that decision making. But money can be a big problem, and the energy of money becomes a big problem to the cohesiveness of the family relationship. Also, one of the processes that we have inside our program is a family performance 360 discovery process. So this is a more formalized process to uncover what each family member thinks about the family and where it's at in terms of its succession planning. So it's really more of a self-rating exercise of each family member and how they perceive the family, and then we bring the results together anonymously so that we can see is every family member on the same page or not in relation to these issues. And so these are the areas that we cover in the 360 discovery. Does each family member believe that there is a cohesive family purpose? What do they believe is the strengths in the family relationships? Is there wealth creation plans? What about wealth transfer? How's that going to be handled? Inheritance? Is there a planned giving plan? What is the family doing in that area? Is there, generally speaking, family trust? And is there family governance helping make decisions? It can be illuminating information. With the Williams family, just to wrap up, what ultimately happened in that family was that they did hold true to dividing up the assets equitably or reasonably equitably, and so that was what they did. But from a management perspective, actually with the business, the control of the business went to the daughter, because she was, one, more highly trained, having had an MBA degree, and is actually quite passionate about the family business. So that's where the decision-making control went to her. For that, she got paid a market-based salary in that business. I think that's also an important issue, that what's the remuneration of the family members that work in the business. That can be a big issue for family businesses. So you've got to get to the place of market-based remuneration, even allowing them to accumulate a little bit more equity in it based on their performance. Is definitely got to be considered, and it can't be sloppy there in that area. And then Brian got a management contract to look after the property and equities portfolio, so again he was remunerated for that. And then George was more interested in the family foundation, and that was an area where he was remunerated, and he was equalised out. So the family, from an equity point of view, was dealt with pretty much down the middle. Everybody was benefiting from all the assets, but it was also recognised that there was different management and who had control of the decision making in the particular areas, and everybody was happy with that and the ultimate plan, and that's what I facilitated with that family. And it's also important to ensure that mum is left in her home, because that's going to be always a big security blanket financially, but also, you know, if the father dies, she's got to have somewhere to live, and she's going to want to have somewhere to host the family. So there's both going to be financial security and emotional issues involved with that. So it's important that, you know, I believe, and I've seen this fall apart when the home is not left to the mother, and that can cause a lot of problems, particularly if the children are younger. So in terms of family governance, again, you know, we've got to look at the governance for the family decision making, and there's got to be policy statements there. Then the business has got to be managed on its own two legs as well. And, you know, we've got to remember that how the business is managed and its leadership could be separate from the family ownership and the decisions that are made there. So, you know, in a way, setting each up as its own independent unit is a good place to start with that. So what are some of the next steps for, you know, building behaviourally smart families and, you know, building that deeper connection with or between the generations? Definitely financial DNA discovery can be delivered for each family member. A longer-term family continuity plan can be put in place. We work with another firm called Da Vinci Global Consulting. Mike Peduzzi, who runs that firm, has worked with me for a long time on family initiatives, and you know, we've been helping some families with CEO and board advisory services to help particularly the family business. We're putting in place a Rising Leaders and Generations Forum experience where the next generation can come together and discuss confidential issues about their experience of potentially inheriting a business or inheriting family wealth, and getting that out on the table and being able to share as a group, which is not an easy thing to do. Building the family office out, and then also programs for the younger children.
And then one last poll question. As we wind things up here, what other behavioral finance topics might you be interested in learning more about? And we'll just give you all a few seconds here to respond. This also helps us with, you know, all of our educational forums that we provide, and helps us keep you engaged with your clients. We'll go ahead and close these up and share the results. Pretty even across the board. Goals-based planning is going to be coming up next month, as well as a number of these others, so stay tuned. Thank you.
Yeah, behavioural finance is a big area for us, and we're very passionate about it and understanding, you know, the decision-making biases that drive everybody's decision-making and getting to the root of them, because once they're understood, the client will have a better relationship with themselves. They'll feel more liberated, more self-empowered, and, you know, that's really why we do all of this, and that's why, you know, we have so much emphasis in our business on mentoring, because we want people at the end of the day to be more self-empowered. And I know for some of you as advisors, that might raise your eyebrow, but the more you have a self-empowered client, they will be a better client. They'll be asking you better questions, and they will be a more sustainable client that's lower risk to you. So I think that's something that's important. We have an upcoming webinar on March 21st on navigating couple differences. So this is very you know, illuminating, you know, in terms of sort of getting to the bottom of, you know, how you know, husband and wives operate differently. They're innately wired. This is why money causes such big problems within the family unit. So our team will lift the lid a lot more on that. Also, as Tripp was just alluding to there, we have plenty of resources on behavioural finance, plenty of tools for you to read and to listen to that can start to educate you on how a behavioural finance approach can be brought into play in your financial planning processes, in your family discovery processes, and frankly, for your everyday life. So thank you for joining us in this webinar today, and we look forward to talking with you more in the future.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good day.